Greetings and salutations, friends and family. Here we are on the first edition of Caribbean Eye, where we get to be the pundits and we get to talk about the news and what is ticking both here in the United States of America or in Canada or in UK or wherever our diaspora is, as well as what's ticking at home. And we are going to be talking about what's in the news, our responses, and occasionally we'll have special guests to help us make sense of the nonsense that seems to be driving the news today. Today, we are going to be joined in the studio by Mr. Mark Millwood, who will help us with our conversation. Mark is the a host of Jamaica Diaspora Show, and we're also going to be joined by Francine Campbell Hakeem, who is with the ICS Health Pillar Committee. She's co-chair, and we're going to have some other friends dropping in who follow the news closely to talk about what's on their minds. So, of course, we're going to be talking, unfortunately, beginning with the issue of COVID, the elephant in the room. So, Mark, over to you. What are you been seeing? You're in Hartford, Connecticut. What have you been seeing in terms of the COVID pandemic? What's hot for you? What has you stirred up?
Well, one of the good things is the fact that we have a hospital chain and a CEO of that hospital who has been very instrumental in reaching out to the community in terms of getting people vaccinated. This person has given us an extensive presentation on how this vaccine was created in such a short period of time, which has been significantly beneficial to people who are reluctant to take the vaccination. And I haven't seen many communities doing that, where you, and in fact, one of our colleagues with the Institute of Caribbean Studies, Dr. Gary Rule, has been also instrumental in reaching out to the community. So that's an area where I'm impressed with the fact that we have that in our diaspora, in our Jamaican or Caribbean diaspora. We have that kind of input. And in fact, I want to say that the state of Connecticut leads the nation in terms of the number of people being vaccinated. So I don't know how you're doing in the other regions, but whenever we look at the status of vaccinations across the United States, Connecticut is leading that charge. And so I just want to say that the Caribbean population here is quite significant and indeed very much involved in generating that kind of outcome. Yes, indeed. So my question is, how are the other areas faring as far as that issue is concerned? Because that's been the major issue, and the mask wearing, at particularly at I'm aware, that mask requirements are pretty much standard in buildings in the greater Hartford area and in much of the Connecticut region.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Can I jump in here, Mark?
Sure.
How you doing? Good. I'm so glad that you brought that up. You went straight to the issue that I wanted to talk about, but actually it was a little bit, maybe about three topics down. Mm-hmm. Hi, Eric. How you doing?
Wonderful.
Good. Yes, so Mark had just started the conversation and he went straight to the heart of what you're talking about is called vaccine hesitancy. And whereas it sounds like you guys in Connecticut have some success with vaccine hesitancy, it's not true in a lot of places. There are different attitudes towards vaccination, and they have been able to identify certain age groups that are, more hesitant than others. And we're going to be taking a look at further into that at ICS, and I can update you about that a little bit more. But to further speak to that, I did get some input from the Caribbean region. I made a couple calls before we got on the phone, and what I'm hearing is that the vaccine hesitancy is alive and well in the region. I was looking to see if I could find some information, and I was looking at the worldometer, which is a meter that is used, it comes out of Johns Hopkins. Okay, and what they're looking at for the region and the way they have it is the weekly changes of the percentage of increase. Places like Dominica having 77% increase, Bermuda 73% increase, Antigua 40% increase, and there's other locations that are reporting Dominican Republic as low as 2. So there are some high reporting places and some low reporting places. The
question is, I mean, we're talking about vaccine hesitancy as if to say we don't understand why that is. And the question is, certainly we live here, so our first focus must be what is happening with vaccine hesitancy here. We have a lot of frontline risk workers, we have a lot of people in the healthcare facilities. What is happening with the Caribbean people in New York, for example, which is a hotspot? Have things changed in terms of vaccine hesitancy? I am looking at news. I'm looking at what's coming out of Carib News, the only print newspaper that really is run by Caribbean people, and I'm not seeing a lot of information in terms of numbers. So we obviously, as a community, are not still operating at the level of, let's say, efficiency and effectiveness in terms of how we the public health.
Yeah, but see, and that's why I went right into that, because we have been doing well. And that's it.
So the question is, what is and Eric, you can jump in because you are
well, sure, certainly, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Nelson, in fact, I represent about 85% of the home health industry here in Washington, D.C. And we have been at the forefront for pushing testing for individuals who've come under high exposure, and to also provide our home health workers with the protective equipment that they need, the PPEs. So having said that, we're able to secure about 300 vaccinations a week at a time when vaccinations were prioritized for home health workers. And I can tell you that we have gotten a very low response with regard to home health workers. Now, let me just give you a background. In terms of long-term care, home health workers, those are the home health aides and the certified nurse assistants. These individuals, that population is, in terms of work group, it's largely population by new immigrants, Caribbean and African American, people, continental Africans. But we see a very low subscription, speaking to the hesitancy that you talk about, in terms of participation in the vaccination. And so we are operating at about a 25-30% in terms of the total population. So we have about 7,000 home health workers in the District of Columbia. So you can imagine that only 25 to 30% of all those who are home health workers, certified, licensed, are vaccinated. Now, the mayor has come out with a mandate, and by September 30th, all individuals, and in keeping with what the president has put out, and there's a lot of pressure by different states to get the president to come out with a vaccination mandate. Why? Because states, as well as home health facilities, they would see an onslaught of lawsuits. So they've come out on those who receive Medicaid, Medicare funding. If you are a home health worker, if you are in the long-term care field, that you should be vaccinated on or around September 30th. We are expecting a very significant of individuals to not meet that deadline. And so now I will say, and we'll continue, we see, for example,
So Eric, you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you're talking.
That is correct. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. Now, I am able to speak on St. Lucia, for example.
Yeah, that's what, okay, I want to clarify that.
And I will say that based on the last numbers that I saw, We still had, I think, under 10% of all the individuals living in St. Lucia who had been vaccinated. The numbers were still pretty low. We now have Pfizer vaccination, and so we're seeing a boost in terms of the numbers, but we're also seeing a real jump in the number of individuals who are infected, because heretofore the numbers were kept quite low. But in my interactions with the medical team down there, and I will not mention names, but I was constantly saying to them, well, what is your prevalence rate? What's your percentage of individuals who have been tested? And you will see that repeat itself throughout the Caribbean. While numbers were being kept low artificially, we just didn't know what the true numbers were. People were not being tested at high rates. And you cannot have a population, for example, of under 1 million, and you do not get at least 60% of these individuals tested, or at least 30% of those individuals, or 45% of these individuals tested. We need to get them tested and repeatedly so that we get a clear sense of what the prevalence rate. So we're now seeing the perfect storm where there's a rush to the hospitals, and I'm very fearful of what may actually occur within the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay, so for St. Lucia, let me ask this question: is it just the United States that's supplying vaccinations? Are you aware, or where are they coming from?
That's a very, very, very good question. I think some is coming from. I want to say it's coming from India, but largely. But I think with the Pfizer coming out, I think that's a batch that was able to come from that group that was sent, by the United States. I will commend President Biden. He's well on his way to try to get a significant part of the world population, vaccinated. And so there's an understanding that we live in a global village. After all, people are traveling to the Caribbean.
Now, that's another issue I wanted to bring up. The fact is that many nations that cannot want vaccinations,
yes,
don't have those supplies. And what other nations besides the United States is being a significant contributor there? That's another issue that I think I'd like to hear your thoughts about. Because
let me jump in here for a second, because I was perusing and I was looking at some items to talk about, and one thing I came across was the dose delays. The Pfizer, it's being reported out of Jamaica and the Gleaner that Pfizer is almost done as shipments behind schedule. So what's happening is the hopes of 82,000 Jamaicans who received their first dose of Pfizer vaccine are due for a second in 3 weeks, hinge on a shipment from the United States that may not arrive in time. Okay, so
who's picking up that slack? That's okay. So why is it that?
Well, let me say something right here. First of all, the Caribbean has a lot of friends. Okay,
right.
Yes,
some people have gotten vaccines from India. Some people have the Chinese vaccine. Some people have the Russian vaccine. And let me tell you, all vaccines are not created equal in the international rule. So people are asking me questions like, okay, I've been told, like, if I get the Sputnik vaccine from Russia, I can't travel to America. That's not accepted. So there's a lot of confusion that needs to be cleared up. And I do not see any attempt being made by the CARICOM governments, quite frankly, to be clear to people what it is that they should be doing. For people who know they have to travel internationally for their job, for their business, they cannot be told you must be vaccinated, take the Sputnik or whatever, and then when they go to America, they say, well, that's not qualified. Then they take another vaccine. That is confusion. So where is the efficacy? Where are we seeing efficacy? And is, in fact, the Caribbean public health system willing, which comes back to the diaspora question, have they made any attempt to reach out to public health experts in the Caribbean diaspora to support what's the need on the ground? Or is it always like, well, we only need when we need it for money? Is that what this thing
The only active people in the Caribbean I've been aware of is Cuba. And the Cuban
well, let me just say that the health professionals have been reaching out. A number of them, through the UN system. I know that the first vaccinations to St. Lucia was around April 7th, 2021, part of that COVAX piece from the United Nations. And I think everyone received, and most of the elected officials, they went and personally received it at the airport, their badge. So there are several different entry points in terms of the vaccination. And I will tell you, because of the high protection, the protection of the tourism industry, that, for example, our equivalent of Dr. Fauci, Dr. Sharon, I don't know why I'm Joseph. Yeah, and she has been on television. She has been the face of the COVID, not the minister, but the medical director. And to a certain extent, to the credit of the outgoing president, the Chasney administration, they really followed her instructions. And she was very early in the process in terms of asking for the medical manifest, if you would, or the documents from the cruise ships that were coming in. And even as far back as November, I believe, of 2020, she was actually stopping ships from actually coming in. It may have been 2019, sorry, because when there were significant cases of fever, of flu-like symptoms. So she was one of the first ones actually stopping, and then she was coming under heavy pressure, but they were supported. Having said that, I want to say the CARICOM Ministries of Health, and some of it led through PAHO and others, they've been very open and conversant about what they were seeing, what they were feeling, and the different approaches being made. So I don't want to discredit what was being said earlier in terms of more direction, but they've been very clear in terms of, as a tourist coming in, which tourists are able to come in, what types of tests and vaccination protocols and quarantine protocols were required. And at some point early on in the stage, St. Lucia actually paid for the hospital stay, not the hospital, the hotel stay of tourists coming in. Of course, it became...
Okay, let's hold it right there and come right back on that, because we are paying for tourists while we can't even take care of all of them.
America is a nation of immigrants, a melting pot of cultures, including Caribbean, which contribute to the bountiful diversity of American society, like Kamala Harris, Winston Duke, Jimmy Jean-Louis, Shirley Chisholm, Skip Marley, Joy Reid, Lenny Kravitz, and Anne-Marie Campbell. We honor their contributions to our shared history and shared future as we celebrate June as National Caribbean American Heritage Month. Join us. Visit celebratejune.org. America is...
So, folks, we're back. Thank you. And we'll continue our conversation on the COVID. No longer a crisis, it's now a chronic issue, right? We have to learn to look at COVID. Let's talk about this vaccine issue and this tourism thing. Did anybody see the news that there's this no movement thing? I'm not sure what's happening in St. Lucia. Two things that are bothering me. One, U.S. government is issuing a no safe to travel to anywhere. Seriously?
Level 4.
Does the U.S. government really have the right to say that anybody's a level 4, given what's happened in the U.S.? I'm just saying. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. And secondly, on this no movement day, Jamaica tourists have ships arriving. So if it's a no movement for the people, how is it we have tourists arriving? I don't understand the logic of that.
Let me answer this.
What else is happening in other islands?
Let me answer this. Let me answer this because I actually spoke to a gentleman who owns and runs a resort in the Grill, Jamaica, who was totally against the fact that the U.S. had labeled them a level 4. He has indicated that the amount of tourists that he's getting at his hotel, at his resort hotel in the Grill, is not far off from pre-pandemic times. He said traditionally September or October are traditionally slow months, but overall, he felt that he that it wasn't justified in the United States designating the country as a level 4, and I was in Jamaica as recent as, well, it was last year actually in December, and from that point when I was there, and the amount of tourism that I saw, which was nil, and what he's explained to me now, I think there's a lot of credence to the fact that maybe things are not as bad as the U.S. has designated.
Well, I don't know about Jamaica, but perhaps they're coming to Negril because, hey, they've heard how good the ganja tea is, and they've heard that ganja tea is good for fever, and therefore it can be used. But I mean, I just feel as if to say, if we are talking about labeling one part of the world worse, how is it that other countries are not getting the same designation? I don't think Jamaica is any worse than anybody else. So, I mean, I'd love to hear what
unfortunately,
St. Lucia.
It's not Jamaica. Unfortunately, it's not only Jamaica. It is a lot of the smaller islands that are having the restrictions and the lockdowns.
What about Haiti?
Is it a restriction to say that tourists cannot travel?
No, I don't think that's what it's saying.
Okay.
It's saying that they can travel, but they need to know that it is a high alert for probably. I was just trying to see if I could find the definition there, because it might have to do something with the amount of the population that is infected versus the total population, some sort of calculation like that.
Or maybe it also has to do with the fact, again, that we don't have the infrastructure and the hospital beds to take care of the people. So this is one of the reasons why I was very excited by the news, the announcement that the Biden administration was going to be spending $3 billion on curatives, treatments for COVID. Has anybody seen any response? Eric, have you seen a response by PAHO or anybody in the in that to how the Caribbean can participate in that? How can Caribbean organizations, Black HBCUs, have you seen anything come up since that announcement?
Sorry, I didn't. Which announcement on? Can you repeat?
$3 billion will be spent on COVID curatives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have been RFPs out there for some time, particularly for individuals trying to reach the hard-to-reach populations, individuals living in public housing, for example, individuals in rural areas. So I think there's opportunity for individuals to participate through a request for proposal. And so they could submit their proposals. But each jurisdiction, local, for example, municipality, they have the opportunity to come up with their own actually approaches as well. Because one of the things that we're fighting and we're contending with in the marketplace of ideas is that there's been so much misinformation out there from very important personalities, people that are in the sports arena, people in the arts, people even in the medical industry. For example, my good friend, I think Dr. Muhammad, who initially talked about he was an expert on HIV/AIDS and antiferon. I mean, he went on YouTube and gave an actual presentation, and you look it up. I think Ali Muhammad, he has a presentation on how the inoculation of this virus, of this vaccination, that there's certain let's just say there's certain foreign substance being put in your system where you're able to be tracked, right? Where you will also, there's certain scientific stuff that has been put in the vaccination that is able to be automated and be used against you almost as a
Well,
robot.
those are the type of things that contribute to the hesitancy, and why we're seeing some hesitancy in some communities. One thing I wanted to, because Eric, you were kind of very instrumental during our sessions in June when we started looking at different, how we as a community, because we know we have going to have hesitation in our community. What are we going to empower the community to do to make sure that that they stay as safe as they can as they try to decide whether they're going to
well, we have to trust, Francine, you're right. We have to trust people that if we give them the best information, if we have some of our health professionals go online, explain to them the vaccine, that this was, although it was accelerated.
And that's what we were doing in Connecticut. Very well.
mRNA, that science, I had one, for example, Caribbean American doc, highly respected. He talked about how when he was in medical school at Meharry, that he studied the mRNA approach to vaccinations. And so it's not that it's only now it's coming about, but there's a tremendous amount of effort to bring it to market. And yes, it was fast-tracked, and we need to explain that. But this idea that a vaccination could be mechanized at some point and can be used in a way, we have to get beyond that point. Now, Dr.
let me, I want, because I don't want to stray too far apart, because there's something that you don't know. Okay.
Yes.
So during our June month, we did meet a woman who, and I think it was a general consensus that the staying as boosting your immune system as you contemplate hesitancy and becoming vaccinated is going to be very, very important. We found a woman who is from the Caribbean and was able to introduce us to a series of herbal preparations that will boost the immune system. And we're hoping that we can do a little bit of work with her to see how well that really works. Because across the board, everybody that was that came to our sessions, they all said the same thing. You must keep healthy. You must be able to fight the virus. Absolutely. If you're not going to take the vaccine, well, we want you to take the vaccine, but until you are ready.
Especially Caribbean people, we know the herbs that will boost our immune system.
Yeah, but may I mention the alternative to that, though? About 3 weeks ago, my good friend, he himself, a physician, buried his son, and his son trusted a certain alternative therapy or treatment that came out of Cuba, for example. Yeah. And he also was able to persuade his entire family to do the same. Well, he was buried not too long ago, died from COVID. So now he's left with a wife that is mourning. She's now a widow. And so the grandfather, his father, told me that he was trying to get the wife to get his grandkids vaccinated. If not her, at the very least, get the grandkids vaccinated. The thing about it, there's so much that we don't know about the COVID. A simple boost of the immune system, I believe in that. I take Immunocal, I take Moringa, I do some of the, all the other stuff that one typically does. But I was one of the first ones to take the vaccine.
Yes, and we must also look at it as complementary.
Absolutely, right. I'm happy
complementary wellness therapies for COVID.
No, I believe though that Francine and Dr. Nelson, that some of the solutions can come out of our communities. Because we are people who know about some of the all of the leaves and all of the seeds and so we can't give up on those things. But in lieu of that, until we're able to get to a point where we have more data.
Oh yes.
It also
nutraceutical. We're trying to break into a whole nutraceutical area because there's a lot of unknown information there, or I should say undocumented and fully researched.
The piece that has gone unreported is that we, as a people of color, and that still needs to be substantiated, but I've gotten it from researchers, some of them affiliated with NIH, some of them affiliated with FDA. So I could clearly say that there seemed to be, and I want to say a predisposition because of our genetic makeup, but it seemed to have a more profound effect, a more chronic effect on people of color. And it has a lot to do with our genetic makeup. I would love for us to do more research on that. And I think there is some of the research out there.
And that would be that you had the right word, us, because it would have to be us.
That is exactly
to do that research.
why, before we take a break and hopefully move on to our next topic, which is governance, elections, and Haiti, and why I want to say we have to come back in this conversation in the future, that my issue is what I call research equity. I feel as if to say we have been forced down this path of vaccines without enough funding for the developing countries to do their own research on their own phenotypes and genomic people, right? Great. They spent no money on the people in the Caribbean who have been working on SARS and other things before, which ganja and cannabinoids are good for. No funding was allocated, and that's why I want to know, is the Caribbean going to aggressively go after, because obviously we can't rely on PAHO because they're very wishy-washy on certain things, right? Are the Caribbean governments who have research hospitals, Trinidad has a hospital, Jamaica has a hospital, Barbados has a hospital, that's talking about, oh, we're going to be in the cannabis business, but they should be upfront saying, hey, give us some of the money for that $3 billion to ensure that our researchers are participating so we can look at these different alternative complementary curatives for when people do get sick. And so that's what I wanted to say. I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, hopefully we can get our other people in. We're looking for Rudy Page to join us. I'm going to come back and talk about governance and Haiti.
May I make a correction, Dr. Nelson, if I may permit? I did mention the Chief Medical Officer of St. Lucia, and her name is Dr. Sharon Belmar George. So I just could not live without at least making that correction, because I botched up her name a little bit, and she's doing such a tremendous job in St. Lucia. Thank you. Indeed.
Okay, thank you. Well, as I was saying, guys, let's just take a quick break and come right back.
America is a nation of immigrants, a diverse mix of peoples including Caribbean, all contributing to the rich tapestry of American life, like Neil Farina, Aisha Curry, Mark B. Joseph, Rihanna, Lester Holt, Naomi Osaka, David Patterson. We honor their contributions to our shared history and our shared future as we celebrate National Caribbean American Heritage Month. Join us. For more information, visit celebratejune.org.
All right, so we are back and we are talking about news and views on the Caribbean Eye. Hopefully we can see if any questions are coming in from our live stream audience on Facebook. Let me actually see if I can find any of that. We did have somebody saying, yes, disparities definitely exist in healthcare. And somebody asked a very complex question about pseudogene formation and the transcription of mRNA into DNA. And I recommended that they may want to join our call on Saturday when we're having a very technical call for the technically minded, which will be have a very special guest, Dr. Gail Defoe, who is the, I would say, author and producer of the virase effect. She has a new formulation from Caribbean herbs that she's been using in the region and others have been using in the region. And so we can talk about. Now let's turn to elections. We have new prime ministers. We're going to have a new republic. What else? Eric, you're the man that's been following these things. And of course, Haiti, resilience and recovery. What is going on in terms of the new people in St. Lucia? Have you had a chat with them? What's happening there?
Oh, wow. Well, as you know, we had a very highly contested elections in St. Lucia that took place very recently. And, Philippe Jean-Pierre with the St. Lucia Labour Party, they actually won that race. It was surprising to some because you had a major move that was made by one of the members of the UWP, the United Workers' Party, which was the incumbent party. You had our good friend Stephenson King, who was a former president and former prime minister, and who was representing Castries North. He decided to switch from being a UWP a prominent member that would have guaranteed that seat, he decided to become a independent. He ran as an independent because he said that he could no longer identify with or recognize the United Workers Party, the party that he was a part of for more than 25 years, and in fact, at one point serving as the prime minister. Now, another prominent member of the electorate actually became independent as well. So what that did was that actually took away those votes from the UWP. But not only did it take away those assured seats, but what it did, it signaled to individuals who were riding the fence on the UWP because they were disenchanted with the UWP, with the Chasney administration. There were, of course, several claims of wrongdoing, lack of transparency, and just really not being sensitive to the issues of St. Lucians. In fact, there were certain faux pas that apparently that Mr. Chasney had made, where he talked about actually the virtues of colonism and how good it was for St. Lucia. It may have been misstated, but St. Lucians really took it to heart. And I think there were also some mistakes. Having said that, the incumbent party only won 2 seats. So they lost basically just about every seat
it's
except.
like they have it in the Caribbean now. I mean, look at what happened in Jamaica. I mean, when they had the last election, LP won, most of the seats.
Yes.
It wasn't as bad as the 2, but in Barbados it was a wipeout.
Yes.
We saw what happened in Dominica. That's a very controversial election. There we had almost people coming to blows. So are you afraid, like some people are talking about democracy at risk in the Caribbean region? I'm wondering why the Biden administration is pushing out this summit on democracy in December when America itself really had a major toppling thing. What is happening there?
Well, may I just say, I think, yes, democracy is under siege in the Caribbean. Why? Because of the introduction of narco trafficking, the drug money. It's big. And also to a certain extent, because of the increase in violence, the targeted killings that's taking place. But having said that, I think what you've seen in places like St. Lucia, for example, is that you still have very sophisticated electorate. And when they fed up with you, I don't care how much money you pay, I don't care how much threat you possess, that individuals, they really vote, and they really participate in elections. So I'm not so concerned about democracy in terms of the long tradition of human suffrage that we've had in the Caribbean. But I am concerned about the heightened violence and the fact that political figures, very visible business individuals, continue to think that they can operate with impunity as far as crime. And that is influencing a little bit, I think, the electoral and democratic process.
Well, we have certainly seen the headlines. Comrade in St. Vincent the comrade in St. Vincent, he was hit by some stones, and we really are wondering what's happening. We'd love to bring on our friend from Haiti, but we're having a problem seeing her on camera. The system doesn't allow us to bring her on unless she's on camera. So hopefully we can get her on camera so we can have her talk about what's happening in Haiti. So so St. Vincent, we had this problem where in fact, in Canada, there's a news today that the Prime Minister, so the uncivility in politics, and of course Haiti, case point Haiti, we have had a serious issue in terms of the assassination of the president. So I'm really hoping we can select Ms. Barjan on to talk about that.
I do hope my good friend. I do hope my good friend Regine Barjan will join us.
I'm seeing her, but she's not on camera in a way. The system doesn't allow. There she is. I'm going to bring her up now. Thank you.
Okay, great.
There she is. Okay.
So we're talking about the fact that the Caribbean seems to be suffering from the same growing instability, if you will, in politics that we've seen in 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 the um in the rest of the world. And of course, we have to say publicly condolences to all the people of Haiti. I think
Absolutely.
we're still reeling from the shock of the assassination. And I've kind of been very interested in watching how they've now begun to call it a murder. I don't know why it is they've been downgraded it to a murder when he's a president. I mean, they wouldn't say you murdered the president of America, right? You would say you assassinated. So why is it if it's a Haitian president and an assassination? That's another pet peeve of mine. I pay attention to these things, so forgive me. So, Regine Bajan, welcome. Thank you so much for joining our conversation. We are on Caribbean Eye, and we're going to be doing this on a regular basis to kind of get behind the news, get the Caribbean voices, Caribbean leaders like yourself, talking about what's going on and really digging into the stories. Tell us a little bit about what's happening on the ground in Haiti in terms of the government. We've seen news about people being recalled, prime ministers being, I mean, what is going on? It's so confusing.
Okay, the short of it, by the way, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to see all of you again or meeting you for the first time. Okay, so just before the call, I spoke to a couple of people in Haiti on the ground just to get the latest possible update. And you basically put it together in a nutshell. Yesterday there was an apparent coup d'état, if you will, on the current prime minister, our latest one, Michel Henry, by the president of the Senate. And from what I understand, it was more grandstanding than anything else. And if it had worked, that would have been fine. And it, it was basically he wanted to be president. They're saying that Haiti does not have a tradition of a single person being in charge, meaning the prime minister in this case, and they were fighting for a two-headed government, meaning president and a prime minister. So, having said that, I think what's foremost on everybody's mind is what Dr. Claire said, and that's the insecurity, the assassination of the president. And I quote again: "The assassination of the president has has everybody walking on eggshells, for want of a better term." And the insecurity is, and it's not just the president. There are, like you said, a number of targeted murders or assassination, if you will, by prominent business leaders, and as well as the everyday person that which doesn't make the news. So the insecurity is really primary right now on everybody's mind in Haiti. And the second thing is governance. And by the way, I should say that the prime minister has an accord or an agreement signed with most of his political opponents or many of civil societies, although some have been deliberately excluded. And that's something that would need to be addressed. So basically, it's security, governance, and really inclusion. And some people are saying, I mean, even some people from the civil society who had a designated representative feels that they're feels that they should have a two-headed government, but they are also willing to listen and compromise if need be, so that we can move ahead and work this out. But really, the most important thing right now is the insecurity that we're seeing in Haiti.
I,
Um, and I think just to add to what Regina's mentioned, what you are seeing, which is democracy in action, is that the new Prime Minister Ariel Henry is consolidating his power.
Correct.
Essentially, he has inherited a cabinet that is more beholden to the former Prime Minister than to him. And so at this point, he's at the stage where he has, and Regine could talk a little bit more about that. He has gotten various members of the socioeconomic strata, if you would, civil society, clergy, business sector. He's gotten them to the table where they've signed, if you would, an agreement, an accord, so that basically he can govern. And so, as part of that governance, he will now have to take full control of his cabinet, where he will rename, reshuffle his cabinet. And so what you saw in terms of the coup or the fake coup attempt, you saw a weakened senator who was positioning himself to be voted as president interim, and really consolidated his power. So you saw the power being trying to be wrestled away from the prime minister. But in the end, the prime minister has won. So again, to your point, while Haiti is going through a very tough period, you do have democracy in action in Haiti.
I don't want to stray away from this point though.
Yes.
Where do we stand with the investigation of the assassination of the president?
Yeah. Well,
do you want to go for it, Eric?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, what I know is that I think it's basically what everybody else knows, and I think the New York Times has come up with a number of articles, and Haiti, I think in many other spheres, we judge the New York Times to be a lot more reliable source of information than probably the government of Haiti, including the prime minister, who was actually called by some high judge commissioner and refused to appear because he seemed to have had a couple of phone calls with some of the suspects the night of the murder. So that's, in all fairness, in all transparency, that ought to be, I mean, I'm sure you're all aware of that, but that should be underlined also. So that doesn't mean that he's but a lot of people are saying that the mandate for his appearing before the judge was political, and and I'm sure
Yeah.
it was.
Yes.
But it probably would have been a lot easier if he had just gone in and explained himself, given those people an hour of his time, and gotten over with, and gotten that particular thing over, like some other people have done.
Yeah.
And we should also state that by law, he does not legally have to appear before this judge. He can decide, it's his right as a citizen, I guess, to not appear if he chose not to, and he decided not to appear before the judge.
Right.
So as for where the assassination is, your guess is as good as mine. It looks increasingly like the Colombians were simply patsies, if you will. In other words, they may not have been involved. They've recanted most of the previous testimony. They said that they were tortured, that they were under duress and being threatened, etc. So, and this is not new. What they're saying actually corroborates a lot with the testimony of the first day or two. The stories changed afterwards. I mean, everything changed afterwards in the
Regina,
following the assassination.
Yeah, Regina, and so that might be a good segue to, not segue, but as part of the investigation. Of course, you would have heard the remarks by the former First Lady of President, the deceased Moise, who had talked about the events that unfolded, and that story has changed. There's been some inconsistencies with that, and of late, she has almost positioned herself to be a presidential candidate.
Correct. Yes.
Upcoming elections. So again, this is some of the new developments in Asian politics, and so we keep our eyes. Now, as far as the investigation, I believe you still have the involvement of the international partners. You still have the commissioner of police, Mr. Leon Charles, and you still have so that's one aspect of it. But all of that is taking place in an environment where you just had the earthquake, and the earthquake has affected mostly in the south, in places like in Jeremy.
Well, it's actually a little bit more than Jeremy, Eric. It's
Lekai,
the Nip, and Lekai. So much of the southern peninsula.
Indeed.
I'm glad you brought up this issue of the earthquake, because I mean, I think the earthquake hit Haiti at a time when everybody was like, okay, we can't take any more, right? This whole issue of resilience. I want to start closing 9 minutes on the issue of resilience. We saw this year, we have COVID. big problems because Caribbean healthcare systems are shaky at best, right?
Yes.
All right.
Correct.
That's one disaster. Then we had a volcano. Okay. That was a disaster. Then we had some flooding in some other country. I think it was Guyana or somebody had some flooding. And Trinidad had some flooding. Then we had, I think,
And
some other
Barbados.
Barbados. Then I think we had hurricane warning or some storms. Even Haiti had a brush
Yes.
up of some. Jamaica has a lot of rain and
Yeah.
landslide and some other things. And now here it is an earthquake. I mean, when we speak about this term resilience, if we probably should just change the brand of the Caribbean region to the resilient Caribbean. And that should be like, come to visit the Caribbean, where resilient people ride or something. Because how much more and how is it that we can really impress upon our governments, impress upon the ministers of foreign affairs, impress upon SEDIMA, that they need to include us, the diaspora, in their resilience planning. In disaster, what can we be doing different? Eric, we have a new government in St. Lucia.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
We can get in on the ground floor and get this conversation started.
Well, I think in the Prime Minister, Mr. J. Pierre, you will find that he's already made some overtures. He's already said that he's open to dialogue. There's a recognition in terms of what the diaspora has to offer. And now you see, for example, in Haiti, you have a very important diaspora group led by, Clement Backer, led by people like Christine Bajon and others, who are actually responding to some of the needs, the health needs, the economic needs of a country that's still recovering from earthquake, not to mention the physical trauma of the loss of the president. So it no longer can one just, not acknowledge the contribution of the diaspora. It has to be an integral part, I believe, going forward to the solutions in the region. And I think in addition to that, I must say that I'm not sure if we have a segment on it. You have
Does somebody need to mute?
The Africa Union. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't think it. Tell you what, I put mine on mute and let's see if and then we try.
Okay, we're good. We're good.
We good?
We're good.
Okay. But you now have the conference that took place, and Dr. Nelson, you could speak more about that with regard to the African Union and CARICOM. And oh my,
Oh my!
some of my friends from South Africa, from Angola, from Kenya, from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, they called me and they said, my God, we've been putting this idea out for so many years. Why are we waiting for us to come together? Because we are facing some of the same problems. We need technological transfer. You guys are the conduit to the new Africa we're trying to build. So I love what Mia Motley says, that this has to be an annual conference.
Listen, but it's not about a conference. Here's the challenge, right? So I saw the announcement and I'm looking all now for where I can actually see the thing, right?
Yes.
I go back to the CARICOM website and I can't find the thing. So I'm saying to myself, are these people for real? We have all this hype, right?
Yeah.
The people like, certainly me, I've been going to Africa from 1980. It was my first trip to Africa, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have begun to develop in the last, I would say, year and a half, some deep partnerships in Ghana, in Nigeria, and in Kenya. And a matter of fact, ICS is now talking to some South Africans to actually use their youth training coding program as one we work with in Jamaica, because we want to work with the kids from the inner city in South Africa, which work with the kids in Jamaica. And let me tell you, I still can't find what they said at the summit. So I think we should just move ahead with our plans and our relationships. If you have relationships, now we have the cover we were waiting for. But we don't even need this, because look how long the AU said we were the 6 continents of Africa.
Well, let me just say to you that I saw the speech that was given and each head of state was afforded the opportunity to make their presentation. And Mia Motley gave a stunning presentation, steeped in history, and talking about our common heritage. So, and we had Philip J. Pierre, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, also talked about our common history and the need for us to come together and among several different areas, to include even the arts or even in sports. So I must say to you, this time, and of course, various presidents ahead of the African Union, others gave some very inspirational talk in terms of what they would like to see. So I don't believe that it should be just a conference. I think that we need to set up some terms of reference in terms of engagement, and we cannot allow for the same formalities to stop us from engaging our brothers. But we within the nonprofit sector, within the private, within the a civil society, we need to move even more stealth-like, more stealthily, if you would, than the government entities, because they will be hamstrung by bureaucracy. Why wait? For example, my brothers who are manufacturing coffee, or making some of the best, or gold or what have you. We need to find ways of bringing some of this stuff to market. The problem with the continent is that they are not brought into the 21st century yet, right? We still have to go through the same Bretton Woods organization. So we have to go to France if we want to get to Cameroon. Why do we need to do that? So one of the things that Mia Motley said, and I was, very much, I was encouraged by what I see happening, is they are now setting up direct flights to different African countries. You know what Barbados is doing? Barbados has opened up at least 3 or 4 embassies on the continent. So, I mean, those are symbolic, you may say, but those are significant steps.
No, it's not symbolic. Let me tell you why. Because if we're talking about climate change, right? We're talking about the potential for Barbados to have a big problem with population in another 20, 30 years if the salt table and the water conditions become unbearable. Flat islands like Antigua may have a serious problem. You see, St. Lucia has a lot of hills we can run to. Jamaica have hills, St. Vincent have hills. But Barbados and Antigua, for example, they were thinking about where they're going to put excess people in 2050, for example. If we don't get a handle on this carbon problems. And so not everybody's going to want to go south to Guyana where there's lots of land, and Suriname. So we might want to start thinking, okay, how do we benefit from the partnerships that we can create? And so I really hope that we can not just talk today, but even build on the conversation we had on the International Day of People of African Descent, August 31st. We launched the Garvanomics conversation, right?
Yeah.
So Garvanomics,
you may have been reading from Prime Minister Mia Motley's playbook, because she really talked about how we build in on a lot of the ideas of Garvey and some of our other leaders. But one of the things I want to say is, I recall, Claire, my first trip to Africa was around in 1989 to Togo. We were guests of President, at the time it was a dictatorship, right? But to a certain extent, in 1994, 95, I was in Africa again for living with Africare. And, one of the things that came out of the AU conference was that if you are Caribbean national, and a lot of African countries were signatories to it, that you could go and claim dual nationality, right? How many of us are aware of that? How many of us have taken advantage of those opportunities? So I think to a certain extent, as you said, in very meaningful ways, we need to actually re-engage with the continent, and these are some of the things that we need, making sure that policies are passed so that we educate of our people how not to just talk about Africa or participate in some of the cultural frailty of it, but really travel. My last trip in 2019 to Kenya, oh my God, when you realize the vastness of that country, you understand why we have a sense of, we are used to being around wealth, around abundance. You know,
Well,
you know.
listen, we have got this is a good place to bring our session to a close. We are so much on a roll. It is 59 minutes and 50 seconds. And folks, I really want to end on this good note that yes, we have abundance. Yes, we are part of a continent that's bigger than us. And yes, we have the opportunity to move forward together.
Yeah,
So on that
yeah.
note, I want to thank you all for participating. Thank you, Regine Barjon, for joining us today in Tamil Haiti. We hope we can get you back. We intend for this conversation to be a ongoing
No,
one,
no,
so we
indeed.
make sense of the news. In fact, we should probably call this thing making sense, right? Making sense because we need to make some sense of what we're hearing. I want to thank Eric Walcott, who is a diehard Caribbean and part of the ICS team,
Indeed.
Francine Campbell Hakeem, ICS Health Pillar, and of course, Mark Millard, my co-jockey here, Jamaica Diaspora Show. I am hoping that in the weeks to come, we'll have other journalists from other Caribbean news media join us and really get we don't have to wait for CNN to talk about what we can talk about, right?
Right.
Yes, indeed.
One of the reasons why ICS was formed because I was tired of pundits talking about the Caribbean and we were not there. Let us create our own table, as Shirley Chisholm would say. And so this is our table. So bring your folding chair.
When you're
All
folding
the
chair.
Dr. Nelson, I just want Regine to know because we had a very prominent agriculturist in Haiti that was killed recently, Mr. Baptiste Regine. And so I just want to say that this is a man who had been cultivating mangoes for export to the U.S. and elsewhere, Mago Francine. And this was a man who was a man of the people. He went back. He could have gone anywhere and done anything he wanted to do throughout the world. But he was a diaspora and he went back and was doing well. He was killed right
our
in front of his home.
condolences.
And you know, I just want to say that you know, my condolences to his family and to the people of Haiti and to the extension of the Haitian diaspora.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that said, folks, good night. We wish you all the best. And we say always walk good. And let's meet again right here on Caribbean Eye or Making Sense.
Okay.
Making sense.
Caribbean Eye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.